Hello. Hello, everybody. Hello. And a very, very warm welcome to everyone taking part in our NHS themed film night brought to you by Southampton Keep Our NHS Public in collaboration with the wonderful students from Solent University on the amazing television production course. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming along tonight. You have got a brilliant night ahead of you and very good. It's only going to be an hour. You've got a very enjoyable hour ahead of you. My name is Helen Field. I'm a member of Southampton Keep Our NHS Public, aka SKONP. And if you're not already on our mailing list, please do email the email address you can see behind me and ask to be added to our circulation list, and then you can find out what we're up to. You can find out about events like this one and the other campaigning things we do. So it's important that we all network and that we all get involved, so please do that. Can you also be aware that we are recording tonight and we're live streaming this event on Facebook? So you might want to turn your video off where it says stop video on your Zoom controls. And I would request that everybody is on mute unless during the discussion you're going to be talking. And we have also decided to disable the chat function tonight. So if there's any comments or anything that you've got or any questions that aren't answered tonight, then please do email the address behind me and we'll do our best to sort it out for you. Well, today is a very special date because 73 years ago on this day, the National Health Service came into existence, making a massive difference to people's health and people's lives, of everybody's health. And here we are, 73 years on. And I wanted to say a few words about how the films that you're going to see in a moment, how they came about. So in 2018, there were widespread events all over the country for the 70th birthday of the NHS. And we held a stall outside the General Hospital, and we took a great big birthday card, a big giant birthday card, and asked passers-by and people going to the hospital if they'd like to sign it. And afterwards, we found there were so many personal testimonies about how the NHS had helped them, that it gave us the idea that we could make some oral history films about all these amazing stories, because it was such a shame to waste them. They needed to be heard. And that really was how these film nights, the films that you're going to see, started. So what we did is we approached the course leaders at Solent University. They do a wonderful course there. It's a BA television production course. So we got in touch with the two course directors, Tony Steiger and Kate O'Driscoll, and we put it to them about the possibility of making a series of short films, interviewing patients and staff involved in the NHS. And they were very enthusiastic. And it did all happen, I'm glad to say. And the project finally came to fruition just before the pandemic in 2020. But the students carried on. I don't know how they did it, but they did. And the second year students at Solent Uni on the module Life Briefs and Professional Practice, that was the module they were completing, made a series of 10 films. And they really are the most high quality. They're wonderful. You're really going to enjoy seeing them. We're going to show you 2 tonight, and then there's going to be another 2 shown in exactly 2 weeks' time, 7:30 on Monday, the 19th of July. So please be aware of that date as well, Monday, the 19th of July, to see some more of these wonderful films. So the students came up with their work, and we really were delighted with the results. And then with the help of a grant awarded by the community chest at the City Council, at Southampton City Council, we were able to promote the films to a wider audience, and we could deliver both the films and the raw footage to the city archives. And that really is a wonderful result of our collaboration with Solent University. So you are about to see the first 2 films tonight. And the first one is called My NHS, and it's a very candid and a very moving account by Jane Freeland. Jane Freeland is one of our SKONP stalwarts, and she is here tonight. After we've seen the film, then there'll be an opportunity to ask questions and make comments. And then we'll show the second film about 8 o'clock. They're short films, 6 or 7 minutes long. So tonight's film, the work involved was a student production team who were Kate Wood, Millie Hopkins and Morgan Reynolds. And I think you're going to agree that their work is of such a high quality and such a professional standard that it really needs to be viewed far and wide. So we're premiering that film tonight. So Joe Jukes, who I should have thanked for doing that lovely introduction. Joe Jukes is our tech guy. Enjoy.
Hi, I'm Jane Freeland. I was born at the end of 1939, just after the start of the Second World War, so I'm just 80. I've lived in Southampton for about 50 some years, I think, in this house. I'm originally from the West Riding of Yorkshire, and that's where my first hospital experiences happened. I contracted TB of the spine when I was a 3-year-old. Fell down the stairs, had a backache, went to hospital and they found TB. And in those days TB was treated by bed rest and lots of fresh air and supposedly good food. So I spent the years from aged 3 to aged 8 in hospital, in 2 different hospitals. I've got some pictures of me around that time. I mean, mostly I'm lying flat on my back, out of doors. That's me in the Welsh Hospital in May 1944, which was just before I came out. And then I was moved to Thorpe Arch, which was a hospital near Harrogate, near Boston Spa. I learned to read quite young, and we had lessons every day from this wonderful Miss Field, who was actually a very good teacher, and lots of those were outside. So there's a photo that I think the Yorkshire Post took of all of us. I was nearly ready to leave by then. I was a walking girl. I had my son Dan was born here in Southampton in 1969 at the General Hospital, but in those days they had a GP unit. Then after that I wanted more children, and I had a couple of miscarriages, which were very distressing. And in those days they didn't really understand that you are beginning to build this imaginary person. So when it miscarries, there's a kind of empty space. And people didn't recognise this. I went to see a doctor who said, oh, well, you'll very quickly get pregnant again, won't you? And that'll be fine. And the whole way in which it's dealt with now, it's another case of the way the NHS learns or has learned. So there's a really clear recognition of the way that people grieve for these, what used to be thought of quite clinically as just a fetus that's miscarried. Well, I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 1991, and I was shocked that I'd got the thing. I'd had a little lump some years earlier, and it had proved to be benign, and I assumed it was going to be the same thing again, and it wasn't. So I opted to have a mastectomy, and that was done fairly quickly. I was with a group of 3 other women in this ward. You stayed in a week. And then the next lot of patients came in, and the nurses came along to us and said, they're all waiting in the waiting room at the other end of the ward. and they're as scared as you were when you came in. If you feel like it, you could always go down and chat to them a bit. So we went down and chatted to them, and they couldn't believe that we looked as well as we did. A year after I was given the all clear, about 1994, my husband was diagnosed with colon cancer, and he was operated, and that was fine, and then it came back again. Then he had to have more serious treatment, and then his final problem was in 2017, about 2 years ago, when he had to have more drastic surgery because things began to go wrong with his colon again. I mean, that bed where Alan was in this special unit makes you think about what's meant when people talk about having enough beds. Because actually a bed isn't just, you know, a frame with a mattress on it and a patient in it. That bed became the focus of all these things, and so every hospital bed is like a kind of constellation of people around him. The NHS has made all the difference. I actually wouldn't be here if it weren't for the NHS, I think, nor my husband.
That was absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much, Jane, for taking part in that. And the students did, you can see for yourselves, that is an absolutely wonderful piece of filming. Absolutely excellent. I would have thought that was something totally professional. I wouldn't have thought it was second-year students doing that. So credit to Kate O'Driscoll and Tony Steiger as well. Absolutely fascinating. What a wonderful course to have that can produce work like that. And that's only the first film. We've got another 9 to go. And they're all of the same high quality. Brilliant, brilliant. I'm so impressed with them. So what we're going to do now is we are going to have a short discussion until about 8 o'clock, and then we'll watch the second film about 8 o'clock. Now, because we've disabled the chat, if you did want to ask a question, you will have to speak up. You still don't have to show your video, your face if you don't want to. But the only way you can get my attention is to look at the participants key. And then if you click on that and find your name, there is an option to raise a blue hand. And I will be looking at that. And then it will show me all the blue hands that are waiting to speak, and also they're in order. So that's the way that you can make a contribution. And I am going to ask people just to be fairly brief, you know, perhaps 2 or 3 minutes of speaking, and then we can get as many people in as possible, because we've got 42 people on viewing us at the moment, which is great. That's lovely. I don't know, Jane, would you like to just to make a brief comment, seeing as it focused on you, and there you are looking so lovely and healthy. Would you like to start us off with the comments?
Yes, I'll just say a few words, really. I think for me, I mean, I've watched it a lot of times, that film, and I actually find it quite teary. But at the time, it was very interesting to be there. I mean, the students came, they rang me up in advance. They talked to me by phone about the kind of thing that I might want to talk about. And then they based a sort of interview script on that, like a kind of note-taking. And then they just interviewed me, and it was the most natural thing in the world. We'd sorted out some of the photos and things like that, and they just kind of put the camera over my shoulder and took a few pictures of the photos that they thought they'd be interested in. And it was very relaxed and easy. And then because at that point, they'd just got the filming made when the pandemic started. And all the rest of the work they had to do in their bedrooms at home, without all the magnificent equipment that Solent University has, you know, editing studios and all kinds of stuff like that. They had none of that. They had access to the city archives. Some of them had access to the city archives, but then again, that was also cut off. So for me, it's near miraculous that they got anything done at all. And actually what has come out is really so good. I think they ought to be really proud of it. I don't know if any of them are here tonight. I hope they are. If they are, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Oh, that's great, Jane. Thank you. Thank you very much for those comments. I was actually going to ask Kate O'Driscoll, because I know that Kate is in the audience. I was going to ask if Kate might have expanded a little bit on how the students managed to do so well under the lockdown conditions of COVID. So I don't know if you're there, Kate. I can't actually see you, but if you wanted to unmute yourself and speak. We're still on Jane's screen at the moment, Joe.
Yeah, I think I need to speak and then it will change to me.
Oh, lovely. Hi. Hello.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for those lovely words, Jane, about the students. I kind of echo just how well they did. Sort of, it was all going swimmingly for the first 6 weeks of production, and then suddenly, you know, catastrophe happened with COVID, and they really did show great amount of resilience in how they continued, as Jane said, editing from their bedrooms, talking to us remotely. But I would like to say as well, I mean, something that we often talk to them about is just what a privilege it is to work in something like television, where you get to meet the most amazing people and film with them. And we often say, you know, please don't take for granted that people are willing to share their stories with you on camera. It's such a wonderful thing. And I think, you know, these films were a real lesson in that for the students, really appreciating that special relationship that you build with a contributor, and just how much of a privilege it is to hear stories like Jane's and to be able to film that and to work with people like Jane. And I think this was a wonderful experience for the students to go out and meet such a lovely array of different people with different backgrounds and different stories to tell. And they really connected with that, and they really engaged with that experience. And the films, I think, are a real testimony to the relationships that were built between the students and the contributors who were involved in the project.
Thank you for that, Kate. That's brilliant. I think also Jane's story really does highlight how important the NHS is to us. And I would just love these films to be on mainstream television, and I would like to have the whole of the current cabinet sitting in a room watching all of these films, because you can't fail to be moved by Jane's story, and what a success story it is as well. So I'm as I say, I'm very impressed with these films. Now then, I've got one blue hand. I can see Maggie's raised her hand. So Maggie, would you like to unmute yourself and make a comment?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I just wanted to thank Jane. I have to say that I was moved to tears. I think these, I think your recent contributor said testimonies, but I think, you know, contributions like this are really precious. I did an oral history project years ago, and these things are priceless. And so I'd like to thank you for sharing this.
Oh, that's great, Maggie. Thank you very much. Thank you.
It would be so good. Can I say something, Helen?
Yes. Go ahead, David. Go ahead.
Yeah, if Unite get a TV channel, we could put something like this in.
What a good idea.
It goes ahead. It depends who gets elected, of course, but as the General Secretary. But yeah, that's it.
Thank you, David. That's a really good point to make. Yes, they'd be a super thing to have on a Unite television channel. Yes, excellent. Okay, we are over 2 screens. So if you can't find the blue hand on participants, but you do want to speak, if you put your hand in front of your face, I will see you. Let's have a look. I can't see any hands, and I can't see any blue hand. Oh, yes, I can. Glyn Oliver. Glyn, unmute yourself and tell us what you're thinking.
Yeah, I just very briefly, that was wonderful. It's really interesting. And what a wonderful, wonderful thing the NHS is. And I think, we must never forget that the Tories have always hated it. They still hate it. They would like a free market. They're into cronyism. The only gain we want from the NHS is lives saved, like Alan and Jane's, not profits made. And as we know today, that the Tories are passing a bill, the Health and Social Care Act, which is all about cronyism. It's about more privatisation. And so the fight goes on. So all our energies, instead of the energies going into patient care and how we can improve it, it's constantly being degraded, I often think, by the Tories, who just want to make money out of our most wonderful, wonderful health system. And it's a wonderful film. Thank you very much, Jane and Alan, for coming forward to take part in that. And it really it exemplifies the wonderful service that it is. And we need to keep.
Thank you very much, Ian. Okay, I'm looking for hands and I can see Gavin. Gavin Ribeiro, would you like to unmute, Gavin, and then talk to us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say after what Glyn said, the Tories hate the NHS, but let's not forget that the current Labour leadership, they've not done much to criticise the current privatisation that's been going under the Tories. So you need a strong opposition that fights for socialist policies, and under Keir Starmer, that's not happening. So, Aneurin Bevan said, I've got a little quote here. He said, "We back before the 1945, I think, general election campaign, he said, we enter this campaign at this general election, not merely to get rid of the Tory majority. We want complete political extinction of the Tory party." And I think that kind of sums up the spirit that, we need a strong socialist spirit and a Labour Party that isn't afraid of talking about socialism, because it's socialism that gave us the NHS. And that we always need to keep that in mind. And under the current Labour leadership, we're not going to get that. So, we need to keep our eyes on the ball there and hold everyone to account and fight for real socialism. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Gavin. Just before I bring Sue in, Sue's indicating she wants to speak. I would just like to say that there's another quote, isn't there, that Aneurin Bevan said, that the NHS will survive as long as there are folk who will fight for it. And it might be that our political leaders aren't doing it, but we certainly are. And unions, Unite Community, Keep Our NHS Public, there are huge numbers of people campaigning, and the evidence of that is on Saturday when there was a national day of action with KONP, Keep Our NHS Public, up and down the country, probably hundreds of thousands of people out on the streets, talking to people, giving out leaflets, flagging up that the NHS is still under threat. Probably never been under such great a threat as it is at the moment, but we are fighting back, and we mustn't feel overwhelmed that there's nothing we can do, because we can, and we are strong together, and we've got to really keep that at the forefront of all our efforts. And it's films like this that keep us going. So just let's remember that as well. Okay, Sue, take it away.
Okay, thanks very much. Yes, I'd like to echo everybody else who said, what an excellent initiative this has been. And it's nice to see things approached from a slightly different angle than just the usual meeting. So I think this film is excellent. And like you say, such a high professional standard and deserves to be widely seen. And I look forward to seeing the other films that we're going to see. But the point, I'm also a trade unionist, and I come from the Southampton Trades Union Council, and I've got members of my family who are employed by the NHS, and they at the moment are all very scathing about the the George Medal that is being given by the Queen to the NHS, and and the claps that there have been for the NHS when they complain on a daily basis about the poor pay, the lack of staff. It's particularly the lack of staff, which of course is the result of years of underfunding and of running down the NHS. And I think Glyn mentioned about this new bill that is going through Parliament at this very moment, which seeks to extend privatisation and threatens the breakup of the NHS. And I echo the points about, Nye Bevan, and, we need to be prepared to fight for the NHS. So I think there's a lot for us to do, particularly as trade unionists, in order to push the government back on this. But to do that, we need to be active in our trade unions. And certainly my granddaughter, who's a paramedic, has said that, although they don't want to, that she's prepared to take strike action or whatever action is necessary, not just about her pay and conditions, but in, for defending the gains of the NHS. Thanks very much.
Oh, thank you for that, Sue. Yes, I totally agree. I mean, I think, when we continually hear this government saying we're not going to privatise the NHS, and they wouldn't include the amendment at the bill that went through a few months ago, but they are doing it. They're doing it by stealth. We've seen this with the takeover of GPs, surgeries, and I've got a long list of services from Southampton hospitals, which it's a great long list of services that are already privatised, lots and lots of things. So we've got to keep fighting, but we've really, we mustn't lose heart. That's so important, because it does feel overwhelming at times. But we've got to keep going, and we will win. Okay, I can't see anybody else who wants to speak. I'll just check on the other screens. I can't see any blue hands or any waving.
Can I just say another small word?
Yes, carry on, Jane.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking, in view of what Sue had just said now about staffing, in relation to that little bit in the film about the bed, because a bed is staff, and you can't have one unless you've got X number of staff. And that doesn't just mean nurses, that means cleaners, that means health assistants. In the case of Alan, it meant speech therapists, physiotherapists, dietitians, nutritionists, surgeons, pathologists, all the people that are there in the background that you don't see. You see the nurse, but the nurse is the front point of action for a lot of these people who are doing things. And yet it's staff that they're constantly running down. Now we haven't got EU staff. We haven't got the training, the new GP training that was supposed to have been going on under Cameron. Not a single GP has yet emerged. And so it goes on. That's all. I could go on forever, but I better not.
Oh, quite right, Jane. Couldn't agree more. That was a lovely comment you made about the bed, and expanding on it now. It's so true. Right. Okay. Last chance, and if anybody wants to speak on the film you've just seen, and if not, then we're going to go to our second film. Now, our second film is called The Workhouse: Life Before the NHS, St Mary's. And the production team on this film are Emma Kane, Kieran Wallace, Belinda Villa Rodriguez, Linda Sixner. So we've got the fruit of another very talented group of students from Solent University. Thank you, Jo.
My name's Dr. Kevin Reynolds. I'm a GP here in central Southampton, St Mary's district. I'm interested in the history behind the beginnings of the NHS, and even before that, the old Workhouse institution that existed in our area in St Mary's. And part of that comes from this whole principle of caring for a population and not relying on what the population can afford, so free care at the point of delivery. And the other reason why I'm really interested in the workhouse aspect and history here in Southampton is when I started at the surgery, I was meeting elderly folk who had actually been children in the workhouse or had relatives, aunts and uncles, particularly aunts, that had been in the workhouse through reasons such as teenage pregnancy, unmarried, unsupported, or they had TB or a chronic illness which the health services at the time weren't able to fix, or the family had no resources to fund care of that.
For this abounding provision, O Lord, we thank thee.
The workhouse, a place for those caught between poverty and destitution. Before the NHS was established, this was the last hope for those who had nowhere else to turn. And even then, the workhouse wasn't somewhere you would want to end up. The Victorian Poor Law Act in 1834 meant those who could not support themselves were forced into the care of a workhouse. In return for working, they were fed, clothed, and given medical treatment. The workhouse, situated in St Mary Street, Southampton, was built in 1868, adjacent to the Christian Church. The church was one of the few charities in Southampton where the poor, homeless and the destitute could find shelter, food and basic medical help. Although hospitals are commonly unheard of in the Victorian era, in many ways the healthcare available inside the workhouse can be seen as a predecessor to the modern-day hospital. The workhouse had its own infirmary to treat inhabitants who fell ill, free of charge. There were no designated medical or surgical wards, nor was there an operating theatre. Operations were done in a side room and destitute of proper instruments, cupboards and fixtures. 153 St Mary Street was situated to the left of the workhouse. It was built in the 18th century with the intentions to be occupied by the doctors treating the patients from the workhouse. This meant that the patients, especially the urgent cases, could be seen to at any hour of the day. Historians are still debating when exactly the workhouse system came to an end. Some have stated to 1948 with the introduction of the National Health Service, when many former workhouse buildings were turned into public hospitals.
Well, it's a huge employer now, but it's the provider of all health services to the whole population based on need rather than means to pay. So it's great for a city like Southampton, which is international and there's a large number of people who are surviving on benefits. So the workhouse idea in its latter days, I think, became a bit of a dumping ground. We don't have that ethos now, so everyone is worth saving, in my view. Everyone deserves the best treatment that we can do, the best treatment we can afford as a country, and no one should be thrown away.
Excellent, excellent, and another superb film. I'm just so impressed. Yes, Gavin's clapping. I'm so impressed with the technical expertise of these young people, because if they're second year students, what Kate could probably tell us, that there must be 19. They're under 20. I'm not sure if any of the students are here. Perhaps if you're a student that was involved in the production of the films, perhaps you could give us a wave, because I think what now they will have, Kate can correct me on this, will they have graduated by now? So they might have left the course.
They've just finished, Helen. Yeah, they've just finished. So I suspect they're on their way home as we speak. But if I could just explain, this project is a perfect example of how COVID really made them have to find a new direction and find creative ways of producing a film, you know, in these sort of challenging times. Because what happened was they did the initial interview with the GP, but then that's all they'd filmed before lockdown hit. And the idea was to do a kind of Who Do You Think You Are style film, where the GP went and looked at these sites and discovered in the archives all this information, and it would be revealed through his journey. But of course that couldn't happen because of COVID. And so what the students did was they created, using some amazing archive research they did, and talking to the GP over Zoom and getting information from him and from Joe at the archives, they kind of pieced together with graphics and archive and music and sound design a kind of history of the Southampton workhouses. So it wasn't the film they wanted, it wasn't the film they intended, and you know, it suddenly goes from you know, the GP to suddenly lots of voiceover and graphics and archive. And that was the reason why, because they couldn't actually create the film they had wanted to create. But it still shows, you know, the amount of research they did, the engagement, like you're saying, from relatively young people into this subject. And I think that's one of the real sort of bonuses that's come out of this project, is that sort of engagement that them as sort of, you know, young people really have had with this whole subject.
Yes, thank you, Kate, because I think this sort of history, I'm not a Southampton born and bred person, although I've lived here 20 years, but I didn't know that used to be the workhouse, and I've been in and out of City College, and I had no idea about that historical information. And I think this is the case as well, that a lot of our history, a lot of our working class history is hidden from us. So as you say, those youngsters researching that is brilliant, isn't it? It's excellent. Good stuff. Okay, I'm looking to see if anybody else wants to make a contribution. I've got two hands, so I'll take Sean first and then followed by Gavin. Sean.
Evening, Helen. Evening, everybody. Just a quickie, really. Yeah, like everybody else, very impressed with both films. So very well done to the students. Some incredible quality there. What's the plan now then? Are there any sort of ideas as to what could be done with the films in the future, and whether they could form the focus of other meetings or be incorporated into other meetings to inspire people?
Well, at the moment, we've got a showing of another 2 films in a fortnight's time, so a format similar to this one, and then we review how it's gone and hopefully show some more films in the autumn. And I mean, also there are lots of other places around the city who would be prepared to show them. I think I saw somebody from is it City Eye here? So because I wasn't actually involved in the group SKONP.
Who is here from City Eye.
That's it. Okay, so she might like to say something about the possibility of showing the films. But it's all certainly something that could happen. You know, nothing is ruled out. And I think some of them would be nice to show in schools as well. And they could be shown at Solent Uni as examples of what the students come up with. So I think there's a lot of scope for these films, and they're so good. They really do need to be shown far and wide. So thanks for that comment, Sean.
Helen, can I say, in fact, a part of the city chest money that was given to us was because we made an application for the project, which included some extremely generous offers from people who normally charge an arm and a leg, have to, for venues. So we have, in principle, we've got bookings in City Eye, we've got bookings in God's House Tower, possibly in the Sea City Museum and other places. But of course, at the moment, we haven't been able to use those because of the pandemic. So once it's possible to go back and have screenings, then we want to make them the focus of larger, more face-to-face meetings. And the screenings like this, if you like, were out of sheer frustration of not being able to show them at all. So here we are online, but hopefully soon we'll be in a cinema in front of a real screen.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks very much, Jane. Gavin.
I just wanted to bring up a bit of history because I saw the video, the second film, sorry, I should say, a fantastic film again. It brought up the poor law, and not long after that, because in the 30s you had the first one, in 1842 or somewhere around that, you had the new poor law. And that coincided with a big burst, with another big movement, the Chartist Revolution. And, a lot of the Chartists were involved with the trade unionists. And there was a general strike, I believe, between the 26th of July and the 7th of August. That was a buildup of like the Chartists working for the Charter and against the new poor law. And all of these, it culminated in a big general strike. But I think the importance here is, like, to say the trade unions played a big part in that as well, and goes to show that we need to be aware of our working class history. And in the Chartist movement in general, it inspired and educated people like prominent socialist thinkers like Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, who then learned a lot from the Chartists and then developed scientific socialism. And let's not forget, it was the writings of Marx and Engels that also inspired people like Aneurin Bevan, who was also a diehard socialist. And, without socialism, we would not have the NHS. And I recommend everyone, like Helen said, we need to learn our working class history, because none of these changes comes from the ruling classes. And I recommend this book, The Chartist Revolution, written by Rob Sewell. It's got plenty of great working class history in it. And, I highly recommend everyone study the book. So that's all really. Thank you.
Very much, Gavin. I'm looking to see if anybody else would like to speak. I can see David. David, unmute yourself.
Oh, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, can I just have a couple of words on, first of all, the Workhouse, the Southampton Workhouse, St Mary Street. I think even if you go down there now, you've still got the entrance for the boys on, I think it was the left, and the entrance for the girls on the right. You can still see the sort of wording of it for the entry points. And I can lay claim to some history with it, because I did my A-level in chemistry when I was 18, which is more years ago than I can think now, in there, because it was then at that time an educational thing. Also on workhouses, I think, and others can prove me wrong, but I think the General Hospital itself was a workhouse building at the start of its existence. So there is also a link there. And being a socialist, I don't quite like to contradict the question of we wouldn't have the NHS because it's of social, or it owes its existence to socialism. I think one of the main driving points for the creation of our NHS was after the Second World War. Now, I'm not advocating for one moment that we should have wars in order to have NHS, but I think it was the sort of dire situation that the health services were in, and the mood of the country was to improve that and never return to that. And that is where the NHS was born, and that's where the NHS has got the system of free at the point of delivery. And I feel that what I remember as in SKONP, when we were talking about these films, what we were trying and hope to bring out, and I think it starts to do it, and the others also contribute to that, is to get an appreciation of what it was like before the NHS. And that also goes back to the war. And my sort of worry, if you like, about the scene at the moment is that we can get the value of the NHS, but we're sort of, to a certain extent, being shielded from the disintegration of it that's going on in front of our eyes, but behind a hidden badge of the NHS. I remember a couple of years ago, SKONP approached the city council here because there was a problem that we had identified of ophthalmology delivery within Southampton, but also it's a national problem. Sorry, you're going to have to shut me if I'm going on too long, Helen. But my point is that there's a lack of training and a lack of expertise within the NHS, because there was a deliberate policy over a whole decade past of not having people trained to the degree that they should do. And we see rising waiting lists before the COVID thing. And now what's worrying me even more is that because of COVID, those waiting lists are now going to go sky high and going to take years to overcome. And we are in danger, if we don't sort of value the NHS, which is what these films will show, of losing it by stealth and by graduality, because the services that will be offered by private hospitals will be faster in their delivery than a running down or a very sort of understrained, understressed NHS. And I'm hoping that people would appreciate from looking at these films that this danger exists now in front of our eyes, that it's nothing, it's what it was, is not what it is now. And unless we do more to sort of campaign to recognise the question of the long waiting lists are due to the lack of resources and that, then we're not going to have our NHS. And I do worry about that.
Yes, thank you. And you're not alone in that concern, David. I've got two people waiting to speak, but just before they do, just following on from what David said, please do sign up to our emailing list, even if you just know what's going on, know what we're up to, and also look at the website SKONP as well. Can you mute David and Anna?
Sorry.
And can you mute and look at the site? Just Google it, KONP, Keep Our NHS Public. There's an absolute mine of information there, and you know, information is key in all this. If we don't know what's going on, we can't act on it. Right. Now then, I'm going to take Maggie Harding first, followed by Maggie Fricker. So Maggie Harding, off you go.
Okay, I just wanted to say that the setting up of the workhouses was really in response to the fact that you've got industrialisation, you've got so many more people coming to the towns, and it becomes impractical just to feed people during the winter to keep them alive for the agricultural work in the summer, which was what was happening beforehand. And also, I'm afraid the return with that attitude that the poor were endemic scroungers. And the only way that you'd make them go to work was if you gave them an alternative that was so unpleasant. And that alternative was the workhouse. And it's right that later on it became a place for misfits, sick people, old people, people who basically had mental health problems. And they also became infirmaries as well. And they all had hospital wards in them, where people got probably not very good treatment, but they got treatment. And it is true that later on, where the General is now, that hospital was set up really in the 1920s, 1930s. It was an alternative to what already if you like, poor wards that already existed in the workhouse at St Mary's. So yeah. It's an attitude, I'm afraid, that's still with us. The attitude of if people don't work, they're scroungers.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that view is fostered by this government to divide us all. You know, it's in their interest to keep us divided. Thanks for that, Maggie. I'm going to go to Maggie Fricker now.
Hi. Yes, I wanted to reiterate what David said about privatised services taking place in Southampton. And I work in, for those that don't know, I work in the X-ray department at Southampton. And during the pandemic, the private sector stepped in to support what we were doing, not in terms of helping so much as making a very fat profit. And I think it's to the advantage of the Tories that we have huge waiting lists, because I think what they plan to do is to say, look, the private sector helped us during the pandemic, and they'll step in and help run the health service and provide all these extra services. And I think it's going to be used to speed up that process of privatisation. But for those of us that had to work alongside it, we found those private services incompetent and and not working well with just doing the kind of the easy stuff, and we really struggled trying to work with them, but they were there very much to make a profit. and this health and care bill that's about to go through the House of Commons. I think, you know, with every bone in our body, we need to fight this. And I'd like to thank SKONP for all of the fantastic research that you do to kind of point this stuff out. And in some ways, I think, you know, kind of us in the sort of trade unions and the Trades Council, we're kind of two sides of this, two swords in this battle. And I think it's enormously important that, you know, the trade unions, you know, stand up to fight against what's taking place. And can I encourage people to come to the Trades Council public meeting on Thursday, which I imagine, because I think people are on the mailing list, that somebody from SKONP can provide the details for that.
Yeah, thank you. Have you got a health service speaker, Maggie, at that meeting?
Yes, we've got someone, not an official person, but we've got somebody from the Unison region.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm looking for hands, but I don't see any. I'll just mention a programme that I just found myself listening to yesterday evening, File on 4 on Radio 4, and it was all about the healthcare of prisoners. And because such a huge amount of the prison system is privatised, I didn't realise that so is the healthcare that the prisoners are given. And there was 3 cases of people who had died horribly in prison because their needs and their health issues weren't met, because of an ineffectual private health company, and also because there wasn't enough prison officer staff to take prisoners who needed to go to A&E. So again, it shows how these cuts and privatisation are no good. I don't see how it can carry on. You know, something's going to come to a crux very soon, I think, in this country, maybe in the whole of the Western world, because you can't run a country in this day and age. It's almost like nothing's improved from the late 19th century. You know, we've got people dying in prison for lack of healthcare. It's not on, but we all know that. I'm talking to the converted. Okay, I can see Glyn Oliver indicating to speak. You might be the last one, Glyn. I could take one more after Glyn.
Well, sorry, I just wanted to come in. I heard that programme as well, Helen. It was absolutely so sad, wasn't it? It's 3 young lives lost. They're incarcerated. Who cares? Who gives a damn about them? They're inside. It's almost as if, you know, are they worth saving almost by these private companies who don't put the services in place? There's no coordination between these private firms and the NHS, and it was just so tragic. And I think that's why we've got to get the bloody private sector out of our health service, not the Tories' health service, it's our bloody health service, and that's why we got to fight for it. You know, already we can see, you know, dental care, mental health, hearing, knees, even, you know, all these things are just becoming part of the history. They're not done in the NHS, and it's all becoming privatised. And you know, if we don't fight for it, there'll be more and more and more.
Thank you, Glenn. Yes, absolutely, good point. Adnan, would you like to speak to us? Can you unmute?
Yeah, thanks very much, Helen. Sorry, I missed the the first film. I had a problem with the internet connection, but saw the second one. You know, I'm very proud of the NHS, and you know, of course, we have to defend it. And I'm you know, equally proud that we have you know, our family that work in the NHS, doctors. And you know, my youngest cousin is a consultant up in Manchester. My sister's husband's a doctor, and they are very fearful, you know, for the future of the NHS. And they can actually see, you know, during the pandemic, you know, in terms of the pressures that, you know, that were put on the NHS, and how heroically, you know, people actually managed. And I think the point that you know, David and Darton made earlier on about, you know, privatized by stealth and the waiting list and so forth is something that they, you know, they have kind of, you know, discussed, you know, and chatted with me, and we have to be very, very vigilant, and we have to sort of campaign, you know, constantly when we have to raise awareness, because often, is actually presented, a bit like, the test and trace as a NHS initiative. It was quite clever the way they were trying to attempt that, and rightly we took every opportunity to expose that it was not the NHS test and trace, and how much it costs. So it's very important to continue to highlight the impact that the private sector is having on the NHS. I mean, during the last general election, John Pilger's film on the NHS, which I'm sure many of us, other people have seen, about the threat, and which was actually pulled, by ITV till the general election was over, if people remember. And a very powerful reminder as to the threat that is being, posed by the private sector, and we need to, carry on campaigning. I was very pleased to turn up on Saturday at the hospital and at, outside Bargate, and a few of us actually put up a banner, over the bridge, and it's still there, wishing our NHS, a very happy birthday. And we put on Saturday. This afternoon, I walked past, on my way to the gym, and it was still there. So that's really good.
Excellent, thank you, and thank you for posting the little video with that banner, Adnan, as well. That was great. Now we're going to have one more contribution from Kate, and then I'm going to hand over to Ginny Levitt, who's going to round off the meeting tonight with some thank yous and credits. Kate.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. Just a sort of a final word from me on the value of this project, sort of moving forward. I know you were talking about potentially showing it in schools, and I think one thing to highlight about what this collaboration did was, engage a younger audience, in terms of the student body, in valuing and taking an active interest in our NHS, because obviously, touch wood, for most people, you don't really use the NHS until you get slightly older, and obviously the older you become, the more important the resources that the NHS has to offer become. And I think it's really important that our young people are actively engaged in sort of appreciating and understanding why it's important for them to be vocal about protecting it as well. And I think projects like this, are perhaps a way of doing that in a really sort of, in a really successful way.
Thank you very much, Kate. Thanks, some great points there. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Ginny now, who's going to round things off.
Thank you. Actually, Kate has started me thinking of other avenues. I'm Ginny Levitt, and I'm a member of Keep Our NHS Public in Southampton, and there were 4 of us on the committee who really wanted to focus on this issue of thanking the NHS by showing what it does mean to individual people. And the thought of working with young people who, I mean, if you don't have to use the hospital or you've grown up with it, you take things for granted. We all take things for granted far too much. And so the other 3 who worked on it, particularly with me from Keep Our NHS Public, were Abelardo, Clariana Piga, Jane Freeland, whom you've met, and Maggie Harding, who spoke previously. And what was wonderful when we first got involved with the students, and they were told by Tony Steiger and Kate that the theme of all 40 of the second year students was going to be the NHS. When they came to the presentations that we gave, their enthusiasm was fantastic. There were questions, there were comments, there were some very enlightened students who knew exactly what was happening. We had to hold them back and say, look, you can't be, for purposes of the Solent University and for purposes of funding, we can't be political. But of course, the NHS is political. But I just wanted to state that and reinforce what Kate just said. Somebody you haven't heard from tonight was also very instrumental in the project from the very beginning. And you'll be seeing her on the 19th of July, Padmini Broomfield. She's an oral historian, which she was last paid in oral historian. Before that, our oral history department was done away from. And she helped us with the city archives, and she also helped to present the project to the students, particularly to introduce them to the notion, which had been spoken to obviously by Solent, of the ethical aspects of interviewing, which is so important that she's so practiced. The other person which was mentioned at passing, I think by Kate O'Driscoll as well, was Jo Smith. And she's at the City Archives, and again, was so enthusiastic. I mean, honestly, it was really surprising how she said, oh, yes, let's get the students down here that can come in groups if they want to show them around. And of course, she sat with the four of us and also Padmini and eventually some of the students to go through what was available in the City Archives. So thank you to her. Obviously, Southampton City Council has been thanked for the community chest funding. And I think particularly we'd like to say thanks to Jo Hughes, who at that point was the administrator of grants. And she did help us a lot with the applications that we had to do. Susan Beckett, City Eye, who I think is in the audience and hasn't said anything yet, hope she will on one of the other show screenings. She supported us again from the very beginning with discussion about film generally, and also with our funding application and offering, as has been told before, with screenings at CI on the loop system and also having small meetings there. So Glenn, we have lots of ideas and lots of opportunities to show these hopefully in person when we think we will be able to get more discussion going with groups of people. Dan Crowe, A Space, God's House Tower, did the same. In fact, there was always, there was talk of a whole weekend at God's House Tower with forefronting of these films and the theme of the NHS. And let's hope that may go forward. The interviewers, we want to thank them, and there were many. You'll see several of them more in the films that you will review screening. But there were a lot of people that we approached, and we had to search, who volunteered to be interviewed. And so, I mean, I think we could well do this again, Kate, with another group of students, because we've got those people waiting and willing. And last but not least, well, penultimately, I'd like to thank Helen Field for chairing tonight, and also Joe Dukes behind the screen, who's just put up this. You have all the names in front of you, and also, of course, all of you for attending, seeing the films, and participating. And we really do look forward to seeing you again on the 19th, and I'm hoping in September we'll all be there again, because the 4 films that are not included in this 4 are every bit as good and all on slightly different aspects. Consultant from the General Hospital from India, it's great. But another 2 in 2 weeks' time, and thank you everybody for coming and participating in the project.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, NHS.
Happy birthday. Happy 73. That's my age.